we're seeing surges of Bible sales, so that's been reported widely. And you talk about the pandemic. I've certainly heard so many stories of people who started reading the Bible during the pandemic, just because sometimes because they were bored, sometimes because they were with much less to do, but also sometimes because they were reaching out for hope and stability. So it feels like there's sort of both a resurgence of interest and a younger generation who know so little about it, who are intrigued and curious. And then there's also that kind of, you alluded to it earlier, there are some risks associated with that in terms of, some of the way that can be politicized. And maybe also a little bit of pushback from some feel like there may be some almost skeptics who are almost more tolerant of a belief in God. But when you say you believe in the God of the Bible, that becomes more of a problem. So how are you sort of seeing the Bible faring in the cultural shift?
Yeah, I do think that there has been a change. Yeah, certainly in the way people talk about the Bible. I think partly it's just that the new atheist approach has faded. So the new atheists were the ones who tended to be the ones kind of with this very dogmatic anti-Bible, look at the God of the Bible, isn't he awful sort of approach. And I think partly the reason people are kind of engaging the Bible in a slightly more open-ended, sympathetic way is because the new atheist voices just aren't what they used to be. They're a sort of bit of a shadow of their former self. And so I think that gave space for these alternative voices to start picking up the Bible. And so when you had people like Tom Holland, Peterson, and plenty of others starting to say, maybe we should take a second look, I think it was sort of interesting and different. They weren't so interested in sort of getting to grips with, the exact historicity of the thing or the kind of some of those moral questions in the Old Testament. They were more interested in the bigger picture questions about the fact that this has shaped us as a culture and this has given meaning and purpose and identity to countless generations of people. So I think framing it in that way, in a slightly more psychological, cultural way, kind of enable people to sort of have a different tack in, if you like, on the Bible than this being forced by the new atheist to constantly look at the worst passages in the Old Testament or something. And I think, I like you, noticed a lot of people just suddenly talking about, well, I'm going out and buying a Bible. I'm going to try reading the Bible for the first time. Now, inevitably, when they do that, if they actually do read the Bible, they'll soon probably come across things that will be confusing or difficult or whatever. But they'll also, like the person I mentioned earlier, come across some quite beautiful things and some things that may well speak to them in very unexpected ways. So it's always going to be a sort of, see what happens. And I genuinely believe giving someone a Bible to read is a good thing. Okay, yes, it's going to bring all kinds of questions with it, but actually I think time and again, just people sitting down and reading the Bible, something happens, something quite remarkable very often happens when people just take the time to do that. And for me, I think one of the appeals of the Bible and why it has kind of started to become almost more fashionable in those cultural circles to talk about it and encourage people to maybe go and look at it is just that it's old. It's been around a long time. And I think especially those younger generations, they feel quite burned out on having to keep up with everything that's new and just the fact you can't. And it's a sort of, there's something quite important and feels quite different actually for a lot of, I think, people and young people especially to go and read something that is just so different to anything they're currently being presented with and yet feels important and feels like, and they're being told is foundational. So even if I don't get it, the first time I pick it up, I'm going to persevere. I'm going to keep going.